Testing, testing.
Good to go. I'd like to call the study session meeting to order. This is April 8th at about 5 o'clock. And roll call, we have all the members present except Amy Amaral and Starr may be calling in. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and second to approve the agenda. Any comments? Or all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, there's no opposed, so the motion passes. And with that, we have reports, information, discussion items, the upcoming bond and override. Dr. Winters?
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, technically. Members of the board, kind of deja vu. We are here again, unfortunately, to discuss prospective bond and override election for November. Alicia, could you bring that presentation up, please?
Yes, sorry, I was fighting with the utensil action.
Are you able to drive that, or do you? Okay. So I put together a presentation, one, to kind of summarize where we've been, and then two, summarize some ideas for this upcoming year. It's an opportunity for the board to discuss and ask questions, and then with the idea that next month we would bring a recommendation forward for the election. The same process we followed the last couple of years, with a little bit of a change for this year. So as you know, growth implications with the district, we are always trying to be fiscally responsible, maximize our tax dollars, and maximize existing space. Unless we need to later, there's a link to the growth plan we've created that you've seen many times. What's kind of really thrown a wrench in everything for us this year is, for the last probably decade or so, the district's demographic report in terms of projections has been within 2% of what's actually occurred. This year, we are actually 100 students below our projection, after finishing 10 students ahead of projection last year. So the question is this a one-year anomaly? Is this going to be a trend in terms of our projected growth? With Terra Vallis coming on, you would assume that some of that growth will still continue, but will it be as great as we had projected? We just don't. So I feel like where we felt pretty good about what we were projecting, this year has really kind of changed that feeling. The next slide, Alicia, please. However, I don't think what we need is really changing much. The projection of needing a middle school in 2028, I think, is still a pretty safe bet with the Terra Vallis and the current configuration we're going to have for next year. That we're projecting an elementary school in Tonopah in 2028. I don't feel I could see that one being 2029 now with the reconfiguration, but the caveat to that is, with our projected growth being 100 students less, Tonopah was still higher than predicted. The decrease in students was all from Tartesso, so that could still come to fruition. And then a high school in 2030 or 31 is when we're still projecting the high school. That's a little bit farther out to give a definite date. Back in August of last year, the board voted to build a middle school in I'm sorry, that should say Tartesso, not Terra Vallis. That's a typo on my behalf. I apologize. Remodel and expand Ruth Fisher to create a second elementary school in Tonopah, and to build the second high school in Terra Vallis. Next slide. So here are the estimated costs of those three projects. When we projected these totals last year, we did factor in expenses being greater in 27, 28, so we don't need to adjust these expenses. Middle school is about $54 million. The elementary school and remodel is about 26, and a full-fledged high school is $104 million is what we're projecting by 2030 to 31. And so one of the things we've talked about a lot, I don't think we can go back and run the exact same thing back again this year. Clearly what we did last year was rejected and not effective. So of course there are several scenarios that we could look at. These are the, I think, four that make the most obvious sense, but there's probably some nuance there. If we're going to ask for a bond, we could ask for a bond for $54.5 million to build just the middle school. We could ask for an additional $12 million to take care of safety, technology, and transportation upgrades that we need. And that would be $66.5 million. We could do the middle school and the Ruth Fisher remodel with no safety, technology, or transportation, and that would be $80.3. And then we could ask for the middle school, the Ruth Fisher, the safety, technology, and transportation. Depending on how much money we want to put into safety, technology, and transportation, a $10 million into that area would be, which is what we asked for last year, would be $90.3. But with inflation, that $10 million is now $12 million, so $92.3. And going back to the previous, not going back, but the slide title was, what do we need? What we really need is D, but at the same time, I'd rather have something than nothing. So what's gonna have the greatest chance of passing? And then there's some numbers there on what the average homeowner per $100,000 assessed value would cost in terms of per month for each of those scenarios. Last year's $150 million bond was a $9.70 per month per $100,000. So even the biggest number there is quite a bit less than last year's ask, but it could get even smaller. Before we go on, any questions so far, bond comments?
Just a comment, my analysis on the growth would be the ESAs. You know, he didn't expect ESAs, and that shows all the more because Tonopah doesn't have much choice of ESAs compared to Tartesso. So I think.
Yeah, we know that we've lost 86 students as of, this is about a month ago, 2 ESAs. That was not projected.
Just take his numbers less 5%. You know, it's going to grow a little bit slower because of that.
And that's a statewide phenomenon. You know, there's districts closing schools all over the place, and it's really attributed to that program.
And I tend to go for D because it says we're looking at everything instead of just buildings. But I don't know, that's a lot of money.
We need a scenario that shows an elementary school being built in Tonopah instead of remodel of Ruth Fisher.
That would be more than that. That's going to be probably a $40 million school.
I realize that.
Say again, I'm sorry. Oh, shoot. I don't have my hearing aids.
Go ahead, you want to repeat yourself?
I asked for a scenario that shows an elementary school in Tonopah.
I heard you. What, Dr. Moore?
I said that, can you back up a slide, Alicia, please? So right now, we have a $25.8 million budget for the idea of remodeling and adding on to Ruth Fisher. If we decided to change that to just a separate elementary school in Tonopah, it's about that's going to go up about $15 million.
So 40 million.
That's a rough estimate, say 40 million.
No.
Yeah, I'm not saying to replace it, I'm saying to add it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yep.
And I think we need a demographic study to understand where the growth is now.
So you mean do middle school in Tartesso, Root Fisher not remodel, but do an elementary in Tonopah instead?
Dan, what are you thinking has changed as far as the demographics? You think,
Well, yeah, I don't live too far from Saddle Mountain, and I never thought there really would be much building in Saddle Mountain.
so you think there's a lot of growth on this side?
Four houses have been built.
Yeah.
They put in 3 wells, and you got 4 houses per each well, so there's another just in the little part of Tonopah I'm in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to drive down the streets and see a modular setup or another home under construction.
I haven't been
And I
through,
think we need to understand what's happening in Tartesso. Do they expect any expansion? I don't.
As
probably
far as I know,
haven't seen any.
Tartesso is not, the growth on that side of town is going to be Terra Vallis.
And I'm not saying we need a full-blown demographic study, but he should be able to go in and just pull the permits so we know what building permits have happened since the census. And then you just have a factor you can use for how many kids it is.
They can do it. Yeah, they can take the last full-fledged one we did, and basically, he called it an update.
Yeah.
And it's still a cost, but it's not going to be done by next month. But it could help inform locations moving forward.
do you know if we picked any up from the Buckeye Ranch RV Park? I drove through there the other day. It looks like there's some families living there. You know, they get a fifth wheel and move into an RV park. Do you know, Dr. Winters, demographic-wise, have we picked any up there? Or don't know?
Is that the one off of 339?
Right.
Yes, some have come to Winterswell from there, and then I'm sure Ruth Fisher and Tonopah as well, yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you, Tartesso's HOA went up, so people are not gonna be voting for that. So we have to be careful to pick what to even have it passed.
Well, and if we're gonna go back for the override, we need to really think through, do we want to do both? And which is more important?
Any other questions or comments about bond? You can go to the next slide, Alicia, please. So we're going to transition from bond to override, put a slide so we make sure we're clearly talking about two different things. And I know you guys know this, but this is kind of a public informational thing as well. It's just a bond is like a mortgage, and this funds only capital projects or buildings. Both go through the election process. The override is asking for a raise in our funding allowance, and this funds operations, staffing, and programs. I know ballot language and things for overrides make it almost sound like we're doing something illegal. We're essentially asking our community for a raise. The state's giving us this. They allow you to tax yourself additionally to give us, to go to 10 or 15% more of what the state is allowing.
I like to think the state lets us get us adequate funding, and I want more than adequate for my
Arts Goods, Ms. Marcette has just logged in. Yep. I'm sorry, Mr. Wright, I needed to make sure she had that for the minute.
Oh, she's on?
Yes.
No, I think of the state funds us to adequate funding, and I expect more from our students than adequate, so we got to fund.
I wouldn't even say it's adequate, but that's a whole other,
I was being kind.
story.
Minimal?
Override allows us to staff for enrollment and not ADM. So, I know this is real technical, but average daily membership is how the state funds us, and it's usually a 200 to 300 student difference. So our enrollment might be 3,300, but we're only getting funded for 3,000 kids. And that's a huge difference for school districts. It saves the state money doing it that way, but it does not provide us really the adequate staffing we need for the actual amount of students we actually have enrolled. And it's really critical for us and the community to understand that if a bond passes without an override, we won't have the money to staff the new buildings. So it's either override or it's both. A bond without the override it helps obviously, but it doesn't do us much good practically to build a building and not put people in it. So if you ask me which one is more important, the override is hurting us next year. The bond is not going to hurt us until another 2 or 3 years, but it's going to hurt us at that time when we are severely overcrowded.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Mercer.
I noticed that we're not going to change kindergarten to half a day,
For this year, yep.
but, you know, that's one of the things that would happen if we didn't get the override that we told the public. So I think, based on what we've said to the public and showing them how this is affecting them, that I would recommend that kindergarten get changed to half a day.
Well, I think that's a little late for that. However, that being said, in our campaign materials, that is going to be, there's just no getting around it for next year. The staff we were able to save by reconfiguring was in lieu of that, but for next year, there's no other staff to really cut. It's 5 kindergarten teachers off the top. There's no getting around that for next year.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant for next year.
Yeah. And what the phrase we're using is what we're doing for next year is really a Band-Aid without the bond and override. Without the bond and override, these problems challenges are going to get worse. The only thing that could quote unquote save us is if Terra Vallis takes off and we get hundreds and hundreds of more kids, we would get the funding for that. But in lieu of that, we're going to continue to have, we're going to have to cut another third of the override next year, and then in year 3, another third.
So just to be clear then, the kindergarten is being, when we say next year, kindergarten is being cut this 26-27 school year.
No, kindergarten would be
Sorry,
cut.
27.
Correct, 27, 28, correct. Yeah. And a lot of the, we poured over that, and one of the things was, we know that if we don't have full-day kindergarten, people are going to go to a local school district or a charter school that has free full-day kindergarten, and then they're probably going to take their 4th grader and their 7th grader with them. And so not only are we going to lose the kindergarten enrollment, we're going to lose probably their siblings as well. And so we kind of have a stay of execution on that for 1 year before it hits us.
And how do they get free kindergarten?
They have an override in place, or they have, there's several answers to that question. Override in place, they can, there are districts that have, toward the Phoenix area more, they have millions of dollars in desegregation money that they can use. They could prioritize full-day kindergarten over other staffing decisions and have 38, 40 kids in a class. There's different ways, it depends on what you want to prioritize, but the most common way to have full-day kindergarten is by having an override. The district has had half-day kindergarten in the past. I know one of our current teachers, I remember when we had half-day kindergarten, so it's been a while.
Maybe 80s.
Really? I think it was,
We have had.
yeah. And the other way would be, again, if we gain several hundred students, and then that gain in students offsets the cut from the override, you could fund the full-day kindergarten that way.
So is somebody else speaking?
No,
Okay. So my thought is, we've been saying that if we don't get the money, we're gonna cut kindergarten. So to me, it's like, people think, oh, they're just making all these threats and nothing's gonna happen. And, we say if it's gonna be 27, 28, that's another year down the road. I would think if we're gonna do it, it would be 26, 27. And, I just think the public's gonna say, oh, it's another threat, they have money, they're still doing full-day kindergarten. They're not doing what they said would happen. So that's kind of my thought.
We keep giving them what they're asking for, so they don't see that it's gonna, it's not hurting the district, because we're still getting what we want out of the district, so. But if we don't do that, we already lose them.
we kind of cut off our nose to spite our face. So Ms. King is at a conference and she's on, so she's texting me, well, that's what I'm looking at my phone for. One of the things she said is that our ADM from the state is, to illustrate this fact, is 3,098 students, but our enrollment's 3,292. So that's essentially 7 teachers that we are not funded for, which is about $490,000 that we're not funded for, based upon the difference between ADM and enrollment, actual enrollment. You can go to the next slide, please, Alicia. So this is just a quick table to kind of summarize what we get with the 10% override and what we get with a 15% override. Currently, per year, the average taxpayer is spending $45 a year on the 10%. Next year, because it's being cut by a third, it's going to go down to $30.15. If we do get ask and get the 15%, it goes to $61 per year, which is an additional $1.33 a month. The 10% will allow us to not really maintain, go back to our original class sizes that we had previously. We'd be able to add an elective back to each school, and we'd be able to maintain full-day kindergarten. So pretty much go back to the status quo. With the 15%, we do those same things. We also get to modernize the classified salary schedule, a raise for certified staff, increase our longevity stipend, maintain full-day kindergarten, expand athletics, maintain our CTE programs, and add maintenance staff. But again, I'd much rather have a 10% than nothing at all. So again, is what's going to get passed is really what we need. With the 15%, obviously, we can do a lot more, and I think meet our vision and goals a lot quicker. But if we don't have an override at all, and I should probably come to you and say, hey, this is what I recommend, but I have a daily dialogue in my head about which one I prefer, because I prefer to have the 15, but without anything, it's going to be pretty painful. So I'd rather have something than nothing. But I also think we're selling ourselves short, and we could do a lot more as a district if we have the 15. Any discussion or comments about the
Well, if we,
referring?
is anybody speaking?
No, you're good, Ms. Marcet.
Okay, well, and again, my thought is, we can't count on the override as much as we'd like to. I mean, we thought last year it was gonna be a no-brainer, that it would pass, but it didn't, and we had lots of help, we walked, we did everything. So I'm not feeling real comfortable about it passing again, and I think also if we don't do the things that we said we were gonna do, that, we can always put them back in place. If we get the override, but I think this first year we need to show the public that, we weren't just kicking tires and telling them something we wanted them to be afraid of. We need to follow through with what we said.
And we have done, in some of our planning for next year, we have class sizes are gonna go up. They're not going up to like 40, they're going from like 26 to 28. But class sizes will be bigger. There will be less electives. So those are two of the main three things and then we completely reconfigured the schools. So I think there's been some definite impact on the override not passing. That it's not everything, but it's also a stair-stepped approach, because we lose a third this year, another third, and another third. So this is the response to losing a third this year. Next year, we lose an additional third, there'll be another response. And then by year 3, there'll be another response. So we are definitely responding with exactly with what we said would happen if it didn't pass.
So how much money do we save if we cut electives versus half-a-day kindergarten?
So, boy. So half-day kindergarten is gonna save us ballpark $350,000 to $400,000. Are you suggesting cutting all electives?
No, I'm suggesting cutting half-a-day kindergarten and leave some of our electives, because that's what kids get, that's what drives them to school a lot of times.
We didn't cut, we still have our electives. Every school lost one, but they're still going to be electives.
So what did we lose if we do this?
Music, art.
So at the high school, we lost half a PE and half a band. At Ruth Fisher, and it's really difficult to answer because with the reconfiguration, so I can give you a clear answer for the high school, but it's harder to give you a clear answer for the other 4 schools because of the reconfiguration. Desert Sunset has, they lost art. Tartesso, because Tartesso actually gained an elective, they only had 2 this year, so next year they're gonna have, because they got bigger, they'll have music and band, PE, and STEM. Winters Well lost music. The Ruth Fisher one's a lot more difficult to answer because of, it just is. But they'll still have band and music, PE, and a STEM elective at Ruth Fisher. And so that saved the district about the same amount of money as, it's both about $350,000. It's the same amount of money.
I don't know, I still think we should keep those things and cut kindergarten half a day. It's not that I want to, but still at half a day, our kids are getting most of what they need to enter into first grade, and yet we're cutting all these electives at our school that keep kids going to school. And even if it is, we have one art or something, but we're cutting STEM, which is very important. We're cutting PE. Those are things that are just very important to our kids.
We did not cut PE, we did not cut STEM.
At any school?
Correct.
Okay.
And when we presented the reconfiguration to the board 2 months ago, and the board voted to reconfigure, the staffing was all part of that decision-making. And we've already communicated this to the community, what the plan is for next year, as a result of that vote back in March or February.
Well, those are my thoughts. I'd like to hear something from everyone else, what they think.
On what, Star, we have to be careful we don't drift too far from this study session, because I think the topic we're on is actually on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
So if you look at a consent agenda, There's some staffing actions on there, and if we want to further this discussion, maybe that item should be pulled from the consent agenda into an action item.
Okay.
So when it says expand athletics, Dr. Winters, for the 15%, what does that mean?
So we have mapped out, I don't have it in front of me, but we have mapped out at Ruth Fisher, well, the Ruth Fisher one's kind of irrelevant right now, but at the high school, as it grows, what we'd like to add in terms of athletics, so it would allow us to do that, because each sport is costing the district right now in excess of $20,000. So, but we would like to see, I don't want to give you other things because it's not in front of me, but I think swim team is on there. There's been talk of a wrestling team, girls flag. I think girls flag football was the next one on the list, actually. But that's not even a non-starter without the 15%.
Well, and also under the 15% is to maintain the CTE programs, but even at 10%, that would be a maintain. So is the 15% a growth in CTE, or is it?
No, 15 would be to keep it the way it is. We did not reduce any CTE programs for next year. In 26, 27, we will definitely have to cut at least one CTE program in the 27, 28 school year.
But well, I'm just talking about the 10 and the 15%. So if the override election was for 10%, that would maintain it as it is
That's correct.
today?
Yep, that could be on that column as well. That's correct.
But, so then at 15%, it would still be maintained?
Correct. We wouldn't be suggesting there wouldn't be enough money with all these other things to add additional CTE.
Okay.
And a lot, not the staff, but all the, like, when you go into the construction room and there's welding and all that equipment, largely that's provided by grants, federal and local. So there's a lot of expense with those classes in terms of materials and equipment. That's covered mostly through grants, but the staff is district funded, which is what the override would cover. You can go to the next slide, Alicia, please. So here's just some what's next. I've put together a committee of staff and parents/community members. I gave the principals, you can get a parent and/or if you have a community member who frequents your campus and is involved. Our first meeting is going to be, I think that's next week. And right now we have 2 scheduled. I could see there being more if need be. Going to present to them, get community feedback. Same thing kind of asking here is what do you guys think is going to get this done? I'll have that feedback for the board. Typically, we've called for an election in May. I believe the deadline is in June, so if we needed to push it to June, we could, but I need to double check that to make sure it's not I want to know and not think that before I make that definitively.
So have you identified committee members?
I have one, I have identified one. I'm waiting for principals to send me their names, so I don't have a list right now.
So they'll be sending staff and community
Correct.
people, or
Yeah, correct,
one of each, or?
correct. So presumably a 10-person committee.
Is there any reason why a board member can't attend?
There is not. As long as there's not 3.
Yeah, right. Well, I'd like to, when is this meeting?
April 16th is the first one.
Okay.
That's Thursday.
Yeah, it's tax day is Wednesday.
Well, I think it'd be appropriate for one of our board members to attend.
Yeah, I can agree with that. We just have to be careful. We're in a listening mode, and we don't want to influence or inadvertently direct the committee on where to go or not go.
Well, basically, we're there to listen. We're not really there to ask questions or anything.
There you go.
Sit in the corner.
Ms. Marcel, I'm happy to have you Google Meet into that unless one of the other board members would prefer to attend in person.
What time would the meeting be?
4:15 here in the boardroom.
Both
Well, I'd
days?
be happy to do that.
Let me double check my calendar to make sure it's 4:15. But I'm pretty sure. Try to be respectful of staff's time. 4:50, yeah, 4:15. Thank you.
Both days,
On what day?
both are Thursday.
April 16th and April 30th.
Okay.
Those, unless we determine we need a third meeting, but those are the first two that are planned. And I'll send you a calendar invite with a link again.
And that's not gonna be
Okay,
live,
thank
right?
you.
What's that,
It's
Mr.?
not gonna be live?
I'm sorry, still didn't hear you.
It's not gonna be live, so we can't just listen in?
No, it's a,
We didn't.
yeah.
If he creates a Google link for board members, you could sit and listen that way, but it wouldn't, I don't know how well you're gonna hear.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be streaming through.
Any other questions or comments? I just coincidentally, Vice President of Howard Hughes did call me this afternoon. We've had several meetings and discussions about their involvement again, so I suspect the Political Action Committee will receive the same level of support as it did last year. I believe I've told the board they've hired Karen Taylor Robeson, who was a candidate for governor up until a couple months ago, as a consultant to help even lead the charge. So they're even putting more resources into this time than they did last year. But we can expect their full support again.
Okay.
That's what I have.
Any
If
other
there's any other
comments or
discussion.
questions? No?
I make a motion we adjourn.
I'll second it.
A motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
There was a vote to adjourn, Ms. Marset?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we stand adjourned.
We're gonna take about a 20-minute break. If you wanna just stay on this link, we'll start back up at 6 o'clock.
Okay, sounds good.
You too, Ms. King, if you're able to stay on, we just stay on this, even though I made two